if we're ever going to be able to relive a memory exactly the same way that we have before.
Do we want to? I've spent a huge amount of time and energy trying to create systems that help us organize and re-access ideas. You experience something and then already it's consolidated and turned into us, and then re-expressed through us naturally in all these different ways. And we relive it all the time in our head.
I don't know if it's right or wrong, but I think that's why.
Why is it so important to remember things? You know, it's I'm living behind the scenes. I'm living in the notes. I'm living in like the reflection, and then I'm never actually here.
The proper way to understanding how these things work is more through a kind of quantitative manipulation of ideas, but maybe there's no such thing as a really accurate perception of reality. This is what's like where people are. Like you have to kind of write the story of it to explain,
Right.
but to give exactly the raw experience that you want to.
Right. It would still be manufactured in some sense, or it could even be that there's footage from like the raw experience that was like unfolding naturally, but then it's like cut together with like, and we've talked about this. Like you have like, hey, we're talking about this thing. Cut. Okay, here's that thing, or maybe here's a more in-depth explanation of that, or some like shared knowledge that we have, and then you go into that, and then you cut back to it. Or you just take part of the conversation plus another conversation from later or something, right? Yeah. Like you can still manufacture it in some way while still keeping the content itself.
This is something that actually used to be like devastating, like really very upsetting for me psychologically. The way that maybe scholars or academics analyze the words of like Nietzsche or something. They're not going to analyze the words of like Lil Wayne, probably to the same extent, and that's for a reason. That there's a system to it, but it's so difficult for me to explain because I just feel like out of touch with the idea now. But just that everything is sort of like we're locked into this way that things express themselves, and that there are ideas that will never be expressed because that kind of idea is not compatible with expression.
Interesting. I've thought something maybe parallel or similar with we were talking about it with Anna Vidovich.
Yeah.
When we went to see this classical guitarist playing Bach, which is really old music in a really new venue on a guitar with a sound system. So I was thinking like, in one sense the music is on the sheet music, right? But in another sense, like that music can't exist without there also being an instrument, and the instrument changes over time. So the music changes over time because the instrument changes over time. And then that experience that I had in the concert hall was also dependent on like the sound system, the echo of the hall, the person, the sound engineer, where I was sitting in the hall, also the people around me that are also experiencing it with me. And like listening to the same music that I've listened to before hundreds of times on Spotify was a completely different experience that I just cannot capture. Even if I recorded it, I couldn't capture it. And it's like, in some sense, like the evolution of this music is happening only in the world. You can't somehow reduce it and steal it away and like compress it and store it for later. It's like a living thing. And like there's something kind of like both beautiful and sad about that, because it's beautiful because I was there, but it's sad because I really want to somehow grasp onto it and hold on to it, but you just can't.
Yeah.
I love that because it just makes me think that almost like then we need to find a way to know where memory is stored, and if there's a way to ever like reproduce our memory, because this is, I think, an attempt to recall the memory but never relive it, because it's impossible because you don't relive it in the same way. But maybe as an evolution, and I think a lot about this, if we're ever going to be able to relive a memory exactly the same way that we have before.
Do we want to? I've spent a huge amount of time and energy trying to create systems that help us organize and re-access ideas and memory through better interfaces and computational things and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, I spent all this time trying to like externalize ideas and then the reason one of the reasons I stopped doing, I still think it's a good idea. I think there's a lot of potential there technologically, but like one of the main reasons I stopped is like, well, actually, I'm trying to do something create something that we already have in us, which is just our minds, our memory. Like we experience something and then already it's consolidated and turned into us, and then re-expressed through us naturally in all these different ways. And we relive it all the time in our head, right? It's like, do we want to capture it and crystallize it in this like really solid form so that like we never lose it? Like in a sense, we already don't lose it because it's reintegrated in all these ways, in the ways that I talk about the world, in the ways that I interact with the world differently, and all of my memories and so on. It's like, I feel like that's almost right. Like, and there's this idea with like, in like artificial life or just evolutionary things that like death is extremely important, because if you have something that sticks around for too long, you never have the chance for it to try something else out and adapt to new circumstances. So you need death. And there's other reasons too I'm forgetting, but I feel like it's similar. Like if you try and crystallize an experience, like you never really get to
experience other stuff.
Experience other things, or like properly integrate it into yourself, into life.
That's a good like I think sometimes about how like say this mug was a gift from my grandma, and it's been in my family for a long time, and this one is just new and cheap, and that this one has some sentiment like, well, it's not a good example. I was going to say like how one thing might seem like it holds the experience in it because like with this specific, ratio and these like ripples at the bottom and the color, but could you have the same feeling or the same? It's like loving someone. Like you love someone and then they go away and then you're like, but love's not gone.
Or even loving someone.
I mean, you could like love someone else, like a new person will come along and you could have this as much value. Like you're not losing. If you were losing value, then it would be like, okay, let's go back and get that memory somehow better.
Well, I was going to mention love too in a slightly different sense. I was talking to, I'm kind of forgetting the quote, but from C.S. Lewis about how we have this like really intense, explosive romantic love in the beginning of a relationship. And there's this feeling that we need to like grasp onto that and keep that alive. And if it's not alive, then the marriage is failing or something. But really, we have to let that explosive romantic love die. Like the love that's like looking across the dinner table into someone's eyes deeply, this like really fragile love, so that we can make room for like the kind of dirty, like there's this book, Gift from the Sea, where each chapter is represented by a shell. And one of the chapters is talking about this like really intense love, where it's like the double sunrise shell, which is like two really fragile shells connected by this really tiny little like thing, like this little like muscle that can break really easily. Mm-hmm. And that's like that intense passionate love. And then there's the other love, which is like the oyster bed love, where it's just like there's waves pounding over it. It's disgusting. There's like seaweed on it, and it's just like, and that's the love where it's like you are with your partner and there's toys on the ground and your hair is all messed up, and it's like, but it's still there. It's like this slow burn of a love. And C.S. Lewis says that, like, I can't forget the quote, but that if we don't let go of that first experience, we can never experience anything else. Like, it'd be silly to, like, every time you jump in water, try and relive the experience, the, like, joy, the jubilation that you had as, like, a 10-year-old boy jumping into water for the first time. At some point, you have to, like, give up that, like, excitement and just learn how to swim. And just do the thing that's kind of boring, the thing that's, like, not as explosively exciting, because you have to move on. You have to keep on doing things. I'm not fully formed here.
No, it makes a lot of sense. But one can be a consequence of the other. Like you can start with the fragile, really intense, and then move into the other one.
Yeah, it's like natural progression.
Okay, not as two like separate.
No. It's like natural progression. Like at first you're like, wow, this is exciting. It's like, oh, you have the experience of like, wow, this concert is like beautiful and amazing and like powerful and moving. And then you go on and live the rest of your life and you remember the concert and you think, oh, that was beautiful. And like, now that relates to this thing, it's like, it's this like slower burn.
But do you remember though, that's what I was trying to say, because I feel like memory is so scattered and there's so many memories. I wish I could relive them, but I just can't. The only time that I was really able to like relive, but you're not reliving, was when, through acting, there's like the memory recall. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of that we do that as actors to like sort of get into like a certain state, emotional state, or some sort of preparation. But even that, there's a manipulation of my memory. It's not like an actual memory.
Right.
So I don't know if this comes, going back to that, from a need to eternalize the memory because it fades or because it changes. Don't you? Your memories kind of change as you go through life.
Definitely.
Do you think?
Definitely, yeah.
Right? And I think that's... Maybe that's why. I don't know if it's right or wrong, but I think that's why.
Why is it so important to remember things
I don't know.
Internalize it. Why is it so?
But I have that inside of me. Do you have that?
Like you miss it. You miss things, and then you want to remember them.
It could be, but I don't know if that's deep enough of a feeling for us to have this like almost obsession with.
I think I used to relate better, but
you don't have that need anymore.
I used to take a lot of pictures of things that were happening, and I still do when it's something unique or special. I just like, even if I don't really want to, just like I should have some record. But I don't really look at a lot of old pictures, and honestly, at this point, even if I look at old pictures, I feel like I don't know if that's relevant.
I used to feel...
And I think I started to actually deliberately take less pictures. Like, I was like,
right.
I don't know what I'm doing here.
I used to feel a lot more the, like, sense of, like, this really deep fear and doom that, like, I'm losing memories, that I don't remember things, that things are going away.
Right.
And so on. And likewise, I take more photos and so on. I still kind of obsessively go through photos, and I have, like, a bunch of, like, playlists for the different eras of my life, so I can go back to the music.
Oh, wow. Like, you've organized it?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
and, like,
wow.
And two, like, I used to be, like, really obsessive about, like, taking, like, historical notes of, like, this is what I did this day, this is what I did this month, this was the big period, this is what happened, you know, so that I could go back and somehow, like, and I like, to the point of, like, creating software and stuff where I have, like, voice memos that are transcribed to, like, and, like, putting it all into a timeline so I can see my whole past and go back to, like, the pictures I've taken related to the things I was saying at the time and to the text that I have and where I was on the internet. Like, I really wanted to create this, like, external memory. But, and I still do, I think that there's a lot of potential here. I think that it could help and for various things, for a very specific purpose, like research or something. But when it comes to, like, doing this for the sake of, like, grasping onto life, I feel like there's something deeply wrong there. And part of it, I think, is that when I'm constantly taking notes on something, it's sort of like self-conceited, I think, a little bit.
You think?
I think so. And that it's like, I'm always trying to have this, like, intellectual or, like, crystallized understanding of life, almost as if, like, I'm not here and I'm actually, like, the director somewhere else, you know? Or it's like, I'm like behind the scenes,
view, yeah.
You know? And so I'm living behind the scenes. I'm living in the notes. I'm living in, like, the reflection. And then I'm never actually here. And so I was trying to do this, or create this stuff for, like, specifically for, like, research. And I realized that when I was trying to use systems like this that externalize my memory, I think it just lowered the quality of the thoughts and the work, because instead of attending to the thought itself and just focusing on, like, okay, how do I solve this problem, put all of my attention onto, like, just the thing itself, I was using 30%, 50% of my attention on, like, okay, the thing itself, and how do I categorize it, and how is this going to integrate, and how is this going to be saved, and what does this look like? It's sort of like self-conceit in the sense of, like, instead of just doing the thing that I love or doing the thing that is, like, relevant to the situation right now, I'm also thinking about how I could have done it better and how someone else is viewing me and all these other things. So I'm not really here. And I think as a form of, like, protection, or a form of, like, dissociation, or a form of, like, gaining some amount of, like, control over the situation in a way that, to me, I think comes from some emotional baggage in my life. So I think that it's not always healthy. I do think, though, that after a certain point, and this is something that I'm still unsure about, if it could be, like, so streamlined that you just do the thing and then it happens to be recorded, almost like your memory. You don't have to consciously remember things. You just do, right? And maybe you can go back and, like, recall it, and then that increases the strength of memory. But if it's just, like, an automatic system, then maybe that would be good. But then it's like, what if the system crashes? What if the system...
But that would be internal, like, in our brains? Like, or, like, you just practice, or...
It'd be, like, AI plus your brain.
Oh, right? like the new goggles coming up?
Yeah.
Like, so you can just...
Yeah, I think that's very dystopian really quickly.
Have you heard... Is this mine? I'm gonna get some more water.
I use
I don't know, there's also that thing that we are the stories that we tell, you know? So it could be that you're trying to get, like... Try to get this over here. Maybe, like, a sense of identity comes through remembering what happened to you.
Yeah, I think there's something about getting the story straight. Like, I'm not sure about this. This might just be me theorizing pointlessly, and not coming from, like, real experience. But, like, my dad would be somewhat like overbearing, or like I would say like, hey, this is how I feel, this is what's going on, and he would kind of rewrite the narrative.
To the stuff that you would say?
Yeah, it like kind of like distort reality in a way.
Oh wow.
They're like sometimes really subtle and hard to point out, but consistent enough that I felt like I had to like codify things or like make it like grasp onto something. Like, no, this is actually what happened. This is actually what things are. This is actually like how things work. And not only trying to make clear for myself what was going on, but also be able to communicate that in a way that's like really precise and technical, which is like, it's almost like autistic thing, you know. So that's why I say it's like maybe a form of like self-protection, or partly, and that's one reason maybe, but it's almost like when you are worried about like a workplace issue or a legal issue, you want to like always record everything and like keep all your emails and keep all of your receipts and like make sure that you have the right narrative. Because like you're saying about like we are the stories that we tell, like it might seem like this goal of recording everything is for the sake of like having this unbiased view of everything, just remember everything better and like somehow integrating your life better or whatever. I think it can also turn really quickly into like controlling the narrative. Like I want to be able to present myself in a certain way.
And trying to control like the outcome, like you were saying.
Yeah, like how am I perceived?
Your outcome. Okay.
I think it's tilted.
It's very tilted, but it's okay.
Yeah.
I kind of like it.
Okay. I do think that one of the like scary things about LSD or mushrooms or any psychedelic is that it can make I have a whole theory about it, but it can make memories or ideas more real and more persistent over time.
Oh,
which
wow.
is partly what I think makes it really powerful, because it means that there can be like one subtle, it's almost like you have, if you think about like your internal world is like a system of selves instead of just like one self. There's like information over here and there's information over here, and like this part knows something and this part knows something else. Almost like you're hearing something and seeing something. Those two things aren't necessarily talking to each other. What else you can do, or what even like meditation can do, or various practices can do, is to take what one part is saying and kind of like bump it up, and instead of having like its voice get lost in the noise or get like confined to its like little bubble, its voice can kind of like persist and rise up and like be part of awareness, and therefore also talk with the other voices or the other parts of yourself, which can be really productive, because it means like one idea that is kind of repressed talks to another idea which is kind of repressed, and then they kind of like resolve something new, or like solve an issue that you haven't been able to solve. But it can also mean that like if you think that the world is a certain way, that idea or that like stance or something can persist for a long time, to the point of like it seeming much more real. You can kind of get lost in your own stories about the world. The time perception thing is really interesting.
That to me, and also thinking like it's been like 5 hours and it had been like 10 minutes.
Right.
And I felt that a lot on Read.
Yeah.
Which is weird, but.
Yeah, this is wild that like we have. I think one thing that, sure, drugs are fun, and they're like, I think sometimes really useful as far as just like solving problems in life and so on. But I think the thing that most excites me about them, I think the thing most excites me is like actually solving problems via them, or like resolving emotional things, or like learning something about the world intellectually. That's probably most important. But really close to that is like just learning about how the mind works. Like that,
right?
That like it's almost like when you want to learn something about a material, if you heat it up a bunch, you'll see like how does it glow when it heats up.
And you mean firsthand?
Firsthand, yeah.
Interesting. I have to be skeptical of like. I mean, it seems easy enough to say that like you learn something about how the mind works from drugs, but I'm just trying to think for sure. Do I believe that?
I think exotic states of consciousness, like kind of like when you put something to its extreme, you learn something about it. Exotic states of consciousness tell you something about normal states of consciousness. And this is what like quality researchers do, like devotes a lot there.
The same way, the other way around in terms of cold.
Yeah.
The opposite as well.
Or there's any extreme.
Any extreme temperature.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe, I mean, I think that using drugs to run physical like experiments on people, like to test your philosophical theories of how identity is constructed or something.
No, I think that it turns it from philosophy into sort of science. Because, like, for example, like time perception, like the fact that you can give me a drug, a substance, and all of a sudden, my perception of time is completely changed.
Yeah.
That tells me something about the perception of time.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess that's just like, to me, that kind of thing is not the interesting thing. Like, to me, that's the thing that's like tells you something about how the heart pumps blood or something like that.
Exactly. That's exactly what's interesting about it.
But it's just but it's just like a mechanical thing. Like, oh, this is interesting how that.
Yeah, exactly.
Brain works.
No, that's
You
exactly
don't think
it.
like it's a philosophical idea. You think it's just that. Okay. Yeah.
No, well, because to me, like the way that you would understand more about, like the proper way to understanding how these things work is more through a kind of quantitative manipulation of ideas. Like drugs give you a lot of feeling and a lot. I mean, they can give you you can get a lot of ideas and things along the way. But I just feel like it's only with this kind of, I wish I could explain better, like this very deliberate, mechanized, data-driven, like dialectical process that you can do completely sober. That's how you get like a theory of how things work, and then maybe you could test it with drugs.
There's kind of two things there. One is that you can have this data-driven quantitative dialectical process by giving a lot of people drugs and then seeing how they report their experiences, or like giving them perceptual tests. Like, for example, you can have a thing that's flashing on the screen,
right, and
you report like how long does the tracer last, how long are the steps between the apparent bubbles, and you can then study your time perception via that.
Right.
And then if you do that for a bunch of different people, you can say this is what this drug at this quantity, how that changes this thing. And when you have this change in time perception, for example, you also have these other changes, right? And they coordinate together, and you can do that quantitatively with data. The other thing is that this, like, from the introspective side of it, this quantitative, like, dialectic, ideological, whatever you want to say, like, thing, just thinking about things, is kind of closed or self-contained. Like, you're operating with, like, with a set of tools or mechanisms, and you're just kind of like exploring what those tools do with each other without really recognizing what are the tools made out of, what are the fundamental properties of this like screen on which I'm like working with ideas. And I think that when you, for example, with DMT, for example, it has this huge amount of potential for studying like the mathematical properties of like consciousness, you could say.
Yeah.
Which is literally like, there's a bunch of research on this, right? Like, for example, you can say like, this is a very apparent thing that you get on DMT, which is also apparent at normal states, which is just much more coherent in normal states, so you don't necessarily notice that it's like something that we're doing, is that we have like these competing clusters of coherence of ideas in our perceptive field or our field of awareness, where it's like I have all these little percepts, these like individual things that I'm awareing or like perceiving about this table, that there's like this reflection, this color, and this contour, and so on. And then there's this abstract concept which sort of like amalgamates all of those percepts into this like one thing of like table. There's this coherent cluster of a concept table that is stable throughout time. But then there could be, for example, a competing cluster of like, oh, based on all these things, it's not a table, it's actually a chair, or it's actually like a reflection of your legs. And then, you see this in optical illusions, right? And so on DMT, that can be like so apparent where it's like, this isn't even a table, it's like everything is blue, or everything is like a hexagon or something, and you see like, oh, there's this cluster of coherence, there's this cluster of coherence, and they kind of like phase in and out of each other or something. And then that tells you something about the way that we create concepts about the world, or like coherent concepts of the world. And then you can start saying, okay, well, we can study this from an introspective perspective, or introspectively, and then make claims about like what are the properties of how these things relate to each other and how do things and algorithm and so on. And then you can say, like, for example, there's like theories about like the free energy principle, or like free energy minimization, or surprise minimization, expectation resolution even, that you then apply to these things, and you can create a computational model about this process that reflects this process, and see in this model the same behavior that you see when you're on this drug, right? And so you say, oh, I've captured something that like my mind can do in this computational model because I revealed the properties of it via turning up a knob, making it really extreme, right? And then now that you have this computational model about how it works, and it's verified across different people and so on, well, now we can tune this into a state that's more normal and get a computational model which reflects consciousness, or reflects some of the computational properties of consciousness at least.
Right.
So that's my interest.
That's fair.
Yeah.
I guess for me, I was wondering because, to me, a question like, how is identity constituted, or how is being constituted, or what is the nature of a person's relationship to time, those are more, I mean, they're questions that can be answered, I guess, to some extent, maybe extremely well, I don't know, by ordinary science, but it seems to me like the kind of thing that would be best answered by a philosopher who is basically like a storyteller and a logician, part storyteller and part, logician, I guess. And I'm just not sure, that kind of thing specifically, I mean, that's different from what you said, but that's the kind of thing I was thinking about as far as how I would want to go about understanding the mind, and I'm not sure to what extent, in my experience, drugs would have been helpful in thinking about that kind of thing.
What about meditation for exploring the sense of self? That seems to me very obviously productive.
Intellectually?
As far as perceiving reality correctly, I guess, or like having like understanding what's actually going on, and then describing that coherently, which, sure, is intellectual.
I'm wondering if accurate perception of reality is mostly just is kind of constituted by a series of deliberate, like, how to say, like, it's not just something that you just find yourself with necessarily. I know it can be, or at least it can seem that way, but maybe it could be like the product of putting a lot of little things together yourself. Like there's no such thing as I don't know, I have no idea what I was about to say, if I'm being unreasonable, but like, maybe there's no such thing as an accurate perception of reality. I mean, I would say there is, for all intents and purposes, but maybe there's no such thing as a really accurate perception of reality, just like there's no such single thing as having a fit body. It's just like you exercise your lats, you exercise this, and then at some point, you don't know when, but you cross some point where you're like, wow, I just feel great all around, and I can like run and jump, but it doesn't really, I don't know.
Yeah, I think there's something, I'm not sure I disagree with anything you said, but
I'm just skeptical about like what the best tools are to actually determine what's going on, and even, I mean, that even goes as far as saying like, what is a good explanation of reality? Is there such a thing? Is it an explanation that is true, or is it an explanation that is satisfactorily entertaining and convincing? Or can it only be understood through direct experience?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Or a truth that points towards direct experience or something. I mean, yeah.
So those are just my doubts.